Thank you for stopping by. I'm your political activist, Jeffrey Weiss, working to keep you informed of local and world events. Every week, I will be reading several chapters from my book, Code 6 North of the DMZ. Uh, all my books are fiction based on fact. I do not write simply to entertain readers. My books inform, inspire, change hearts and minds. You can use the same link posted to get to all my books, which are available on Amazon. We will continue this week with Code 6 North of the DMZ. To reiterate, Paul Decker, Delta Force Code 6 operative, has gathered a team to go into North Korea to liberate the internment camps. The team consists of himself, arms dealer Bora Timoshenko, and 4 North Koreans who recently escaped from the camps. Their plan is dependent upon the prisoners and some of the guards at each camp joining their cause. Chapter 1. The team is going over the plan from their base in Seoul, South Korea, the apartment of Mihai. Chapter 2. The White House is dealing with escalating tensions on the border between North and South Korea. Chapter 3. The team is on a plane headed to Vladivostok, Russia, where they will pick up a truck, munitions, and additional team members. Chapter 4. People's Congress, Pyongyang, North Korea. Kim Jong-un argues with the generals about how far he can push America before the country could be annihilated. Chapter 5. Situation Room, White House. The President introduces the U.S. ambassador to China, who explains what they can expect from China regarding controlling North Korea. Chapter 6. Aboard Airbus to Vladivostok, Paul Decker learns of the horrors the escapees endured in the camps. Chapter 7. The White House, Washington, D.C. The Situation Room was in crisis mode. Every station was manned. NCOs and lieutenants were replaced by majors and colonels. The national security team was already in place by the time James Hardesty arrived. Ladies and gentlemen, the president addressed the room, let's dispense with the formalities and get right down to business. He took his seat at the head of the table. What's the latest on North Korea's missile capabilities, Hardesty asked. Greg, why don't you field that? Sir, the Secretary of Defense began. North Korea does have missile-mounted nuclear warheads, but there is some question as to their range and accuracy. Greg moved to the front of the room and used a laser pointer to indicate the relative distances from North Korea to the major cities surrounding the countries. They do have rockets that can hit Japan, South Korea, and dirty bombs here, here, and here, he pointed out. Dirty, the president asked for clarification. Chemical, cyanide, mustard, sarin, and biological, anthrax, ricin, smallpox, Gregory replied, setting down the pointer and taking his seat. Iraq, Kosovo, and Libya all had chemical weapons, and none of them used those because they knew it would mean doomsday for them, Hardesty said. If North Korea did that, it would guarantee an apocalyptic retaliation and more crimes trials for any regime survivors. We've never faced a country that has had nuclear weapons, Michael Davenport, U.S. ambassador to South Korea, interjected. All the old playbooks no longer apply. So, does that mean they would or wouldn't use the nuclear option, the president interrogated. They'd have to be insane to do that, Mr. President, Sharon Delaney, Secretary of State, argued. But they are insane, Mr. President, Arthur, the DODIA, insisted. We don't know that for certain, Mr. Director, Hardesty countered. Sir, Arthur barked, if we do not launch a preemptive strike against the North, millions of South Koreans are going to die from military bombardment, chemical weapons, and quite possibly nuclear fallout, which will make the entire peninsula a radioactive wasteland for 50 years. The DODIA was red-faced and talking faster than normal. He moved several steps in the president's direction, then caught himself before he entered Hardesty's space. The economies of South Korea, Japan, and parts of China and Russia will implode. That's fear-mongering and fanning the flames of a brush fire and making it seem like a conflagration, Sharon said, standing and blocking Arthur's attempt to confront the president, an effort to bring calm to the room and sanity to the discussion. And you're prepared to wait for the North to attack and then act, Arthur challenged, pointing an accusatory finger at the Secretary of State. It's one option, Gregory interjected to deflect the barrage leveled at Sharon. If you do that, you'll be fighting house to house in South Korea against 1 million North Korean soldiers who fear surrender more than death, Arthur warned. That's hyperbole, Arthur, the president disputed. I'm afraid it's not, sir, Michael Davenport, U.S. ambassador to China, maintained. What do you mean? Hardesty asked, surprised by the ambassador supporting Arthur's point of view. We're thinking with a Western mind, Michael responded. If the leadership of North Korea thinks it's going down like the Third Reich, then this kind of last gasp action is very possible. Is it worth going to war with them? The president questioned. What would the world look like after that? You better think about what the world would look like if they start the war instead of us, Arthur argued. I don't like your tone of voice, Mr. Director, Hardesty challenged. You better get control of yourself or leave the room. Michael stepped in to moderate the conflict. Think about the potential if Pyongyang were overthrown, he suggested. South Korea would gain a land connection to the Eurasian continent. A world threat, not just a threat to America, would evaporate. North Korea could be rebuilt and its people would join the world community, and Northeast Asia could advance toward regional integration. And 100,000 people a year would no longer die of malnutrition, firing squads, beatings, and human experimentation, Sharon added. And if we can peacefully overthrow the government, we have to go in militarily. How many people would die in an all-out war with North Korea? Hardesty asked, playing devil's advocate. Gregory raised a finger and took the question. The 10,000 missile launchers aimed at South Korea would get to fire 5 times before we took them out. 5 divisions would get through the DMZ using tunnels and land bridges and take Seoul. Come on, Greg, Frank countered. Over half of North Korea's weapons were built in the 60s. If we put enough pressure on Pyongyang, they could opt for an all-out war and preemptively attack the South, Sharon stated flatly. Remember, it was Russia who supplied most of their weaponry. They're trained in the Soviet School of Military Warfare. The best defense is a good offense. Arthur pointed a rude finger at Sharon. If you look at what Pyongyang has done in the past few years, you'll see a truer picture of their plans. Arthur, as said while walking around the room fast enough to make the others dizzy. They've got 3,500 main battle tanks, 3,000 APCs, rocket launchers, towed and self-propelled artillery pieces. The ground forces have 7,500 mortars, several hundred surface-to-air missiles, 11,000 air defense guns, along with the 10,000 surface-to-air missiles Greg mentioned, all within striking distance of Seoul. What other conclusion can you draw than that they are going to invade the South? They'd have less than 10 minutes before South Korea and U.S. defense would retaliate and take out their missiles, troops, tanks, and armored personnel carriers, NSA Director Frank Kowalski assured. I have to take an opposing view on that, Frank, Gregory interjected. All their weaponry and men are in hardened positions that they have been building for decades. We don't even know where they are, let alone what it would take to destroy them. These people aren't insane, Michael said. They know that any attack would lead to annihilation. Damn it, Mike, Arthur exclaimed. Haven't you seen the videos, read the speeches? They're totally irrational. They don't value life the way we do. They'd be happy to sacrifice 1 million of their people just to make a statement. Do you remember what happened in 2007, 9, 10, and 11 when the North bombarded the South, Sharon asked. Nothing, Frank assured. confident of his position. Exactly, Sharon agreed. Now, remember what happened in the first Gulf War. Refresh our memories, Sharon, the president suggested. Our ambassador to Iraq met with Saddam Hussein and posed a question. What if I was to attack? Saddam posed a question to the U.S. Iraqi ambassador. What if I was to attack Kuwait? Our ambassador was ambivalent, and Saddam took that as tacit agreement that he could attack Kuwait with impunity. Well, we've done the same thing to the north, and they might just take a gamble that Saul's bark and ours is worse than its bite. Sharon enlightened the others. That's a damn good point, Sharon, the president agreed. Allow me to pose a question, sir, Michael requested. You've got the floor, Horace, he replied, edging forward in his seat so as to cut anyone off who went too far with their rhetoric. Admiral Forrester has projected that it would take 500,000 men to extract the North Koreans if they invaded the South. Is that correct, Admiral? Michael asked. Zack stood and walked over to the map of Southeast Asia. He pointed to Seoul. Yes, but they could never hold the city, Zack said authoritatively. That's not their plan, Michael assured. Then what is it, Mike? Hardesty asked. To use it as a bargaining chip. Maybe ask for several $billions in gold. Maybe they strip the city like Saddam did to Kuwait, Michael suggested. You're making these people out to be supermen with a modern lethal military, Frank argued. And you take a different stance than that, Frank? The president sounded out. Yes, sir, the NSA director replied. After weeks of hyperbolic rhetoric, Pyongyang, in a show of force, dropped 5. I repeat, 5 paratroopers on their side of the border in one, I repeat, one, Soviet-Afghan 1980s helicopter. Sitting on the side of the airport were 6 ancient bombers from the same area. If that's the best they got, and I expect it is, they are a paper tiger, sir. The truth is, Frank, Tom countered, North Korea is the most reclusive and opaque nation on earth. They may be showing us what they want us to see while hiding technology and forces far superior than that. North Korea will never give up the nuclear option, Michael asserted. Why do you think that, Hardesty asked? If you read the speeches of North Korean leaders, beginning with the grandfather Kim Il-sung, they believe that the only countries that were never conquered were those that held the nuclear option, Michael maintained. They call it the treasured sword. Either we negotiate with them in that reality, or we risk war in the foreseeable future. We can't allow them to remain a nuclear power, Mike, the president stated unequivocally, and that's written in stone on our side. There's a middle ground, sir, Mike suggested. I'm listening, Hardesty said. Suppose we allow them to have nuclear for peaceful purposes. Give them a bone. Let them be seen as the victors, staring down the great Satan, bending to us to their will. Do you think that's possible, Mike? Hardesty asked. I think it's a place to start, sir. Chapter 8. Airport, Vladivostok, Russia, 6 p.m. Paul High, Sun, Day, and Ook got little sleep, with Borya snoring in the row behind them. The 5 were tired when they touched down, and they hadn't even started the arduous part of their journey. Borya, however, was chipper, ready to go, oblivious to the goings-on around him. The plane had touched down on time, but it took another hour and a half by bus to make the 31-mile ride to the city. Vladivostok was located at the head of the Golden Horn Bay, not far from Russia's borders with China and North Korea. The population was just under 600,000. It was the home port to the Russian Pacific Fleet and the largest Russian port on the Pacific Ocean. The city became vital with the completion of the Trans-Siberian Railway in 1903, which connected Vladivostok to Moscow and Europe, and now it was a vital transit point once again. When Paul Borya and the 4 North Koreans got to the port, they encountered their first obstacle. The ferry, the Eastern Dream, did not go to Primorsky anymore, but only to Donghae, South Korea, and Skatamanto, Japan. Borya swore he checked the internet 3 times to confirm the logistics, but they realized that Russian websites were not exactly updated on a regular basis. It took 2 hours of bargaining to find a fisherman who would take them across the bay in a 30-foot single-hulled dual outboard motorboat, all for triple the price of what the regular ferry would have cost had it still made the run. The 10-mile trip took 40 minutes in rough seas, but they and their luggage arrived in one piece. From there, until they crossed into China, Borya was in charge, a position he reveled in. Once ashore, Paul was taken aback. They were in a national park. There wasn't a light or a road or even a sign in sight. He was almost tempted to ask the boatman to wait, but figured Borya had it handled. The last flicker of sunset disappeared below the horizon, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees in a matter of moments. Their thin jackets they were wearing were woefully inadequate for the 38-degree Fahrenheit temperature. The 4 Koreans were shivering in their meager clothing. "Why are we freezing?" Hai asked. "Is the budget for the operation that small?" "Sorry," Borya said, and looking at the Koreans meant it. "Everything we need is in the truck. We cannot afford any added weight or take away any space in the truck for redundant items." Sounds of the night enveloped them, and they weren't crickets. Pomorsky Cray housed black bears, tigers, leopards, lynx, and wild boar. If they had to spend the night out in the cold and open, they might become tasty morsels for some of the bigger, nastier carnivorous species. Paul needn't have worried. As soon as the lights of the boat disappeared, a truck rolled up with a driver and 2 guards with machine guns. Borya stepped forward to speak to them. There was an animated conversation, peppered with a lot of laughter, which lasted a few moments. Then Borya returned. "The men will ride with us to Yanbian, China," Borya explained. "They say it's 110 miles, but the roads are bad, and there will be delays at the checkpoints." "And there won't be a problem at the border?" Paul asked. "No, the guards can be bribed," Borya assured. "With a small donation, they will allow us to pass." "Then everyone will ride in the back, and I'll take a middle seat in front in case someone gets too curious," Paul instructed. "But tell the men that if the guards insist on searching the truck, we'll have to shoot them." "Okay, wait, I will speak to them," Borya said. The Chechen was gone for less than a minute. "They say it's no problem. Kill whoever you want, but we must dispose of any bodies so it looks like the men deserted, which is a very common occurrence." "Good," Paul said. "Then let's get it started." It took 45 minutes, with all the men working together, to restack the weapons so that they and the others to be picked up in Yanbian could sit in the cargo area. Borya had made sure it was a hard-capped truck, not a canvas top, which could not only be slit open easily, but would also be impossible to heat. When all was secure, they started out for Yanbian. They took Highway 189 south for 55 miles to the Russian-Chinese border. The crossing was no more than a guard shack. Paul could hear the conversation interspersed with raucous laughter. That was good because it sounded like there was more than a few guards. It could have turned into a firefight. The stop lasted only a few moments, and no one came to the back of the truck to inspect the cargo. The conversation died down. The truck was put in gear and slowly started forward. As soon as they crossed the border, a little more than a half a mile inside of China, they picked up Route S-201 north. The miles and the hours rolled by. They were 62 miles from Yanbian, which was barely 15 miles from the North Korean border. And each step in the journey brought them closer to liberating thousands, but also closer to possibly joining those imprisoned and becoming members of the Walking Dead themselves. That will do it for today. Thank you very much for stopping by and listening. I will pick up tomorrow with the regular articles, and hope that you'll come back to visit soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.